Court is meant to be coming into place by 2020, and it will be funded using savings from the closure of courts, and also the court service is meant to be self-funding. So it won't be Briggs himself who's pushing this forward, but someone else, because he's passed the baton on and said that he's not actually implementing it. So this has been backed up by the Transforming the Justice System paper that was recently published, and says that they already deal with disputes in different ways, but can go further in ensuring that they're taking a just, proportionate and accessible approach to lead to swifter decision-making. So they will be introducing a new online process for resolving claims. So that will be moving more cases away from physical courtrooms. And they'll be creating a new process to resolve many disputes entirely online, using innovative technology and specialist case officers to progress routine cases through the system, and reserving judicial time for the most complex cases. So when hearings are required, they'll be held over the telephone or video conference, and that will then enable them, they say, to focus their resources on the most complex and difficult cases. Yes, by all means, Nancy, turn the photos off if you feel they're distracting. So there will be an increased signposting to mediation and alternative dispute resolution services to help people avoid court for minor disputes that will be better handled privately without needing the court to intervene. That's what that paper that was published, I think, a couple of weeks ago says. Briggs himself has laid down the gauntlet and said that he wants to take the A out of ADR. He says that mediation will become the cultural norm when the new online court comes into effect, dealing with all monetary claims up to £25,000. So it's not going to become compulsory to mediate, but he does think that it will bring the court service into a much closer partnership with the ADR community in providing a suitable resolution process as the primary route to resolving civil disputes. So that's us. That's where we come in, building this new relationship with the courts. He's used as an example the small claims mediation service, which essentially will be brought into the court system in the new online court, and it's going to be very similar to the portal that's used for low-value personal injury claims. So basically, he says that for several years, he says people obviously dealt with the cases using the National Mediation Helpline, but then that was abolished. So he wants to bring that back in. And some of you may have had some experience of dealing with the National Mediation Helpline and the after-hours court service, and that's why I'm issuing this call to arms to all of you to see what we can do to actually take this forward. I'd be interested to hear people's ideas as we go along or at the end as to how they think we can get this to actually work, because at the moment, although Briggs's report has been published, nothing has actually happened. So,
I think, Peter, what we could do is once you finish with Briggs, and we can have a pause there just for questions and then move on to do you want to do it that way, or do you want me
Yes, that's fine, that's fine. So anyway, just to continue with that then, at the moment, I think it's intended it will start out with claims up to £10,000 rather than 25. There'll be a pilot of some kind, and obviously they've got to put together the new online system. So with all IT projects, they can overrun, as we all know. But anyway, that's the idea. When you log on to the new online court, it will emphasise the alternatives to the issue of proceedings and direct would-be litigants to appropriate providers of ADR. And again, I would say that's us. And we want to be highlighting the association and as an ADR entity or a body of mediators who are available to help people in this situation. So proceedings will be described in the screens as a last resort, and issue fees will also continue to provide another incentive to seeking resolution elsewhere first. The report was first published on the 27th of July, so it's a couple of months ago now. Nothing much has happened since, I'm afraid. As I say, that's why I'm issuing this call to arms, really, to all the mediators that I know, to get them to try and push this forward, because I think the more people who publicise this and talk about it and get people to try and do something about it, the better, because at the moment I feel like a bit of a lone voice contacting the MOJ and asking them what they're doing about it, and they say, well, they're not really doing anything about it. So I'd really appreciate everyone here listening today if they're able to do something every day to try and push this forward, whether it's contacting the MOJ, I can give details, the person there, or speaking to the court service, anything really to try and to get this implemented, because I fear that if no one does anything, then it will just get swept away and they'll just concentrate on the online court. And the proposal for the after-hours mediation service and the National Mediation Helpline will just get parked. So anyway, the report was published, as I say, in July, and in line with the Chancery Modernisation Review that he did, he thought there should be a change of culture, and he emphasised in that previous review that 92 to 94% of cases settle in the Chancery Division, and he thought that cases should be managed to trial so as to encourage ADR. He doesn't nonetheless think it should be compulsory, but he does think parties should be encouraged to mediate. The judge, Briggs, he said he was persuaded by demonstrations of ODR platforms in British Columbia and the Netherlands, and also CyberSettle in the USA, which I don't actually know much about myself, but he thought that ODR has a much larger role to play in the settlement of claims than he previously thought. And the idea is to have an interactive system to include several stages. And stage one would allow the parties to just obtain information about each other's case, and then conciliation takes place at stage two. So, and then paperless hearings would take place at stage three. So he says that what's novel in the planned online court was putting all of those elements together within the concept of a court, and to make the process navigable by litigants with no or greatly reduced assistance from lawyers. He's backtracked slightly on that and said that lawyers should be able to claim fees for unbundled advice and possibly advocacy if it becomes necessary. He thought the small claims mediation model was inadequate, but thought that it should be expanded essentially, so that the case officers undertake the ADR themselves in relation to the claims at stage two, conciliatory. It's a conciliatory approach, and then you only have your case determined if you don't settle it, and they'll also be able to refer cases out to private mediators, but it's unknown exactly how that will occur. They may have to use their discretion, and they're likely to try and keep cases to themselves rather than farming them out. So I'm just going through my notes here, sorry. He does think that the current small claims mediation service may be suboptimal for some of the cases at the higher end of the value, up to £25,000, because mediators currently don't even have the court file, and they that's obviously only in small claims up to £10,000 at the moment. So as I say, he may allow those cases to be farmed out if they're over £10,000 to external mediation providers or ADR providers. He suggested that the case officers might themselves be trained as mediators. So that's an interesting idea. I think what really is important to us, though, is what happens outside the online court, in a way, in relation to cases that are above the £25,000 limit. And he's suggesting that, as I say, there should be this out-of-hours mediation service. So, as people may know, the court service used to provide free space after court hours for short mediations and funded the National Mediation Helpline, but it was discontinued because of the expense the MOJ in funding the administration of the service. So it's a bit thin in detail, the report, as to how the out-of-hours court service, court mediation service will actually work. So it may be that they would be directed to use it using a mediation information and assessment meeting, but nothing has been really set in stone in that regard. So, as I say, Briggs says the mediation take-up is patchy currently, and he's identified a gap in the market, which is moderate value cases between 10 grand to £250,000, which he says mediation is insufficiently used. And he also identifies a shortfall in the use of mediation in relation to personal injury and clinical negligence cases. I think that's particularly interesting because the NHS Litigation Authority is currently considering expanding its mediation pilot to cover a wider number of cases. And to, in fact, its annual general meeting was mostly about, if you read the notes, about mediation and how it should be introduced. And there's certainly a lot of interest from the NHSLA in mediation at the moment. So, as I say, it's not clear how the parties we referred to the service and the idea or role of mediation information assessment meetings is not developed really in the final report. There'd have to be some kind of judicial input in referring cases to the scheme, obviously. It's not clear where the budget would come from, because it wouldn't really be part of the development of the online solutions court, which, as I say, has money allocated to develop it. I don't know if people are aware of the MOJ's online mediation directory, which replaced the National Mediation Helpline effectively, but that has a lot of drawbacks. And I've been trying to get them to change it. Personally, I've been contacting them because I don't think it works. People who contact it to use mediators on it can't find a local mediator because everybody is listed as being a local mediator. And also it has a fixed fee structure which mediators are meant to abide by, but no one actually does. It hasn't been changed since it was first set up. So I think it's anti-competitive, having the fixed fee system anyway. It doesn't really provide very much information about mediation. It's controlled by the Civil Mediation Council, but they only really have very limited input in it. So the cost, I did an information request, Freedom of Information Act request, and found out that the cost of maintaining that website is £263. So that's quite a difference in relation to the cost of funding a national mediation helpline, which would be more in the region of £90,000. So I'm not sure how they're going to be persuaded to increase from their £263.94, which they currently spend. So I'm continuing with that battle, and again, I'd appreciate some assistance from anyone who agrees with me on that. But primarily, that system needs to be changed if we're going to have a national mediation helpline reintroduced anyway. So, yeah.
Are you ready, Peter, for an intervention?
I am. I know I've been just going on. Yes, it was £90,000 in 2007 to 08. The National Mediation Helpline cost £90,000, and there were 713 mediations. Sorry, yes, Anthony, what were you going to say?
No, fine. I just wanted to interrupt only at the right time. Just to give it a bit of historical perspective, ANM was involved in obviously the court schemes before, when we had court schemes in Liverpool, Manchester and Leeds to complement the service in other court schemes. And then we had the National Mediation Helpline. The problem that the government had then, as it does now, is that the National Mediation Helpline was populated by, quote, local providers, unquote. My view is that, and I would say this, that local mediators should be truly local mediators. And there was no better organization to have local mediators as being the groupings of regional and local groups of mediators who were genuinely represented in the area. But because of the scrabbling for mediations, you had every Tom, Dick and Harry that had a minimum of 6 mediators somewhere in the area going onto the bandwagon, which meant no one had ownership. If you don't have ownership, you don't have interest. If ANM has 4 cases a year through the National Mediation Providers Association, as it does do, we can hardly likely to feel engaged with the process, because we're not really providing a service either to the members or to the public, particularly when you get referrals from Cardiff and Kent as part of those 4 referrals. And so if we had a system whereby a return to the National Mediation Helpline, which would mean that you would have a single point of entry, is that single point of entry supposed to be a bank of telephones somewhere, or is it going to be is it going to be run through the local mediators in the court system, as there are now? They're between 17 and 20, and in which case they could direct the person inquiring about mediation, if it's not dealt with by them, and that's a big if, because they tend to grab the cases as and when they come into them, and the history of the experience, rather, of cases that they tried to outsource is not very good, because they didn't really outsource very many, and I can't think of any they outsourced. And of course, the standard of training for these 17 to 20 in-house, in-court mediators is less than what you and I and all of us have trained. And so they're not, strictly speaking, mediators in the true sense of the word.
No.
But they are quite expert at dealing with people online, which I might say some of us are not. Yeah. We're not really used to dealing with people online in a very tight timescale. So there's a training issue here, as well as a manpower issue, as well as a financial issue. I mean, ANM can't, as it currently is structured, have a full-time administrator, because we don't have the facilities. You've got to then have a proper commercial organization to be able to do that. And it takes you back to the raison d'etre behind the National Mediation Providers Association, which would provide a telephone service and one point in contact. So the same questions are now being asked, Peter, as were asked 8 years ago. Yeah. And that's a bit of a worry. But if push came to shove, I am absolutely certain that we could come up to the template. We could come up to the mark in providing the background for a service that caters for particularly the slightly higher value disputes. If the local court mediators were told you steer clear of disputes over, I don't know, £5,000, because that was the initial idea. So what I put out to everybody is that there's a lot of questions there. And
well, yes, there are.
Despite all the positive comments.
I mean, one of the things that's changed in that period of time is obviously what we're doing now. You know, we could put forward a proposal that, and it's surprising in a way that Briggs didn't mention this about online mediation. He's only talking about court-based mediation services, which is very old-fashioned, really. In reality, this is the future now, what we're doing now. So, I mean, a proposal for telephone and online mediation could also be put forward. But I'm just struggling to see how it's going to work, just as you were just highlighting those problems. Someone has to take the lead here, I think, and approach them and push this forward. And I think that the association that we've got here is a good one to approach and say, look, this report has come out. And we've obviously got the Civil Mediation Council as well. Unfortunately, they don't necessarily seem very proactive to me. Even though I'm on the board, I have to say I don't think they're particularly proactive. And you know, someone ought to have already noticed this, taken note of this proposal, and really pushed it forward from one of these organisations, whether the Civil Mediation Council or the local mediation organisations. So, really, sorry,
I think the future may well be an element of self-administration. You may recall that in Liverpool you had a self-administered scheme of the Law Society, and it potentially has all the benefits of administration, because you don't get the throughput of hundreds of cases, and you can manage it locally. You've got ownership, but there's no standard, because every single court had a different way of doing things. And I think that we could use the local service much more effectively, because we could know the court mediators, the in-court mediators. We could know, obviously, the mediators themselves. We could have a tried and trusted service where we have ownership. So Liverpool mediators would control the Liverpool service. Harrogate mediators, Roy, would control the Harrogate service, etc. But there'd have to be a standard, and that standard should be one that is properly, if you like, regulated, and therefore that's where the CMC comes in. Roy, you're sticking your finger up.
Yeah, just some thoughts as I'm listening to this dialogue, and sort of drawn from my SEN experience. Nancy, this may resonate with you. You've spoken of kind of the rock on which this frequently founders, which is the administration side of it, because we mediators love to do the mediation, but we need a kind of front office to kind of make it seamless, to make it work for all of the parties. And what seems to work in SEN is that unit by unit, in that case it's local authority, which could be as large as a county council or it could be small as a metropolitan borough, they're obliged to have a mediation service, but they then go out and tender for that on a regular basis. And a part of that tender is someone that's going to be there answering the telephone, giving a turnaround time, and they're contracting for a rate as well. Now, that if I was in Briggs's position and wanted to kind of move it forward, that's kind of the way I would go. I might pick out 1 or 2 pilot areas to do it, but I'd say to them, look, this is what you need. Draw a cut-off at 10 grand. Anything above that, up to 250,000, why not? Go out and get somebody to tender for that. And the person who answers the telephone can be any place, but they would then have the commitment to have trained, competent mediators that are able to do that on a regular basis. I don't know, Nancy, from an SEM point of view, do you have any thoughts on that?
Phone answer, have remote telephone answering, which isn't very expensive. But really, I was expecting the MOJ to be taking the phone calls and then just, referring the cases out to the local mediators to either do in the court or by telephone or online, but it's how to get them to actually do something, because they just don't show any interest at all. So that's why I was hoping that everyone here could have a think about how we can take this forward and really pressurize them to actually do this, because otherwise it'll get forgotten about.
Because I would think the MOJ, being bureaucracy, probably would, as Roy said, prefer to tender out and get someone else to do it. And
so how did they do it before? They didn't tender it, did they, presumably?
Well, no, before it was dealt with at the National Mediation Providers Association. They shifted the whole thing to them, and we all paid £100 a year or something like that.
So would that be reconstituted then?
It was, well, you could do, but the trouble is it had 64 members or something, and it kept on shrinking, so it's down to about 40 odd members. But each one expected to be on probably half the panels in England. And we said, look, this is nuts. We'll be on North West and Yorkshire, full stop, because that's where the mediators are. But it goes back to what you're saying. Tort mediation in Hereford had 6 mediator members in the North West, so it could say, right, fine, we'll be on. Roy.
And that's why I think there's a sense in which we need to be preemptive and go along to the say, we think you should tender, it should look like this. This is the service we can offer. This is it. And I think there are issues in having somebody answering the telephone, but I would suggest to you, Anthony, with another hat on, you already have within your Yorkshire Mediation charity people who are there and answering the phones and who could be trained to do that front end for a fee, which would work for them and would work for us. They are there. That's a capability, a resource we already have.
Yeah. And I think if you went to the MOJ, instead of saying, I think you should do something, but if you went to the MOJ with an idea like that and say, look, can we try it in Yorkshire? And you do it as a pilot and have Roy doing some research on it.
If we could put together a proposal for them as to how we think it might work.
And you actually evaluate it.
But to include online and telephone mediation.
Because that cuts the whole cost and makes it much more accessible.
Because there is a cost. So... Well, that was really what I was going to say on that. So I was just going to also mention the Small Business Commissioner, which has been, again, hasn't really been very much publicised, to be honest. If you go online, there's not very much information about it. But obviously it was proposed by the previous Conservative government, and everyone involved has now moved on. So... let's see what happens. Even the Business Innovation and Skills Department is called something else now. I don't know. Maybe it's called the Ministry for Closing Down British Business. I don't know. By exiting the single market. Who knows?
So how does your work with Greater Manchester work then?
Essentially, what I've done is set up a dispute management service with the Chamber of Commerce, which is designed to deal with disputes that members have. So the members can come to the chamber and say they've got a dispute that needs dealing with, and then they'll get in touch with me, and I'll see if it's capable of being mediated, and we can use the facilities there. With a special rate if it's a physical mediation. But the problem with it, as always, is selling it to the businesses and the members to actually use the service. But the idea is to deal with disputes before the members go off to take legal advice necessarily or go off to court. So that was the idea behind it. And it's connected to the Small Business Commissioner because from 2017, the commissioner will be appointed. They're currently apparently looking for a commissioner I haven't seen any advertisements because I would have applied because it'd be a good job to have. But apparently they're consulting on and making secondary legislation, and they'll be recruiting a commissioner, establishing an office and building a website. Then the next stage will be a consultation on the policy that will underpin the secondary legislation on how the commissioner handles complaints. So the three roles of the commissioner are to provide general advice and guidance to small businesses on contractual principles, so explain the law to them, direct them to existing support, which includes alternative dispute resolution providers and ombudsmen, and handling complaints on payment issues between large businesses and smaller ones. So basically, it's the late payment problem that it's meant to address, but it's also going to be signposting to ADR providers. So the signposting is likely to be achieved largely online, and they're going to be consulting. So obviously, in keeping an eye out for the consultation, and when it does come out, obviously, I'd appreciate everyone contributing a response to it, and making suggestions for how it can best signpost to organisations like the association. Essentially, it's another great opportunity out there that's going to come up for mediators, because obviously we're in competition with ombudsmen, but I think mediation does have a lot of attractive aspects to it for business, and the main thing is it's voluntary, whereas businesses don't really want to have decisions made against them. So they prefer mediation, actually, when they have to think about it. So I think it's a great opportunity to promote mediation through this Small Business Commissioner. So I just wanted to highlight that, really, and say that as soon as the consultation comes out, I'd appreciate everyone getting involved so that we can really push it forward. Again, it's another one of these initiatives that could be very good for promoting mediation. We don't know yet how it's going to work. So I
think a lot of it too is actually getting out and talking to people in the business community, because a lot of, if you're talking about small businesses, most of them are kind of heads down, and small business commissioner is up there somewhere and it'll come eventually. But I've been surprised at how little people really know about mediation, about talking to people. And I did actually have someone who was a well-educated person said, so what is mediation? Because they think of family mediation. A lot of people aren't really aware that you don't have to go, through the lawyers. You can actually have a different type of dispute resolution. They sort of immediately think of going to court.
That's right. Well, through the chamber, I'm hoping to publicise mediation more and, do some talks and things like that. So if anyone's interested in becoming involved, that would be brilliant. And obviously there's a possibility of trying to spread it around the other chambers, like Leeds, for example.
Just so that you know, Peter, we had talks with the International Chamber, which is based in Bradford. They have a funny thing, which is like an umbrella grouping of international, companies, all that sort of thing. And it's the only one in the country outside London. And so I thought, well, if we're talking about online dispute resolution, why not go and see them? The problem with a lot of these chambers of commerce is that the members never think they're going to be in a dispute until they have one.
No.
And therefore, if you have a talk on dispute resolution or conflict management, it's the least popular thing on the agenda, because 90% of the members don't have a dispute, and therefore the people that do turn up are the ones that got something really active to talk about, because they want some free advice and all that sort of thing. And so it can be quite challenging. But looking on a positive note, there's two examples I'd like to give. One is ACAS, and secondly, the adjudication in the construction industry. Now, they, in both respects, in the employment field and ACAS, look what they've done, look at the work they've done. It's had to be very substantially publicly funded. So that works well, that model works well, but it's to the detriment of private providers, as employment mediators know full well that ACAS tends to sort of nip them in the bud. But the second example is adjudication, where you have an alternative process that's become extremely popular because it's put into everyone's contracts or it is brought in by statute. And that's the government saying, look, you will, if a party wishes to do so, you must adjudicate.
Well, this is the thing about compulsion, isn't it? That old chestnut.
If you had a system where if one party agrees to mediate, then for small claims, you must mediate.
Yes, unfortunately, Briggs hasn't brought that in, but he is for the smaller claims suggesting that there will be built into the system for stage 2. It'll be built into the stage 2 system, so people will be forced to engage in it.
Yeah. So I've got my reservations about the Small Business Commissioner because it's so tied up in the politics of, I don't know, you've got the ombudsman out there, the services ombudsman, Greg Hunt, all that sort of thing. What's he up to? Well, you know, I don't know. He plays his cards very close to his chest. He was supposed to be in the last webinar but didn't pitch up. So you just don't know. And I wish he'd be a bit freer with his views.
Greg Hunt, I think he's left the ombudsman service. He's left the ombudsman service, unfortunately. So I don't know whether that might explain why he wasn't at the last webinar.
Yes,
he's booked for this one as well.
Sorry,
he was booked for this one as well.
Oh right, okay, yeah.
You better just have a quick hunt. A quick hunt. No, he's not here.
But no, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be a battle with the ombudsman, because I actually went over to meet the ombudsman the other day. Went over because they're not based too far from me. I can see their office from my house, so I went in to see them, and they're saying that mediation or conciliation can be part of the ombudsman process. So again, because the ombudsman is more or less like a court, so I don't think they're necessarily
outsourcing.
Yeah, I don't think that there's necessarily a dispute between mediators and ombudsman. I think the two can coexist.
Yeah.
Sorry, Nancy, were you going to say something?
I was just wondering whether if you can get people kind of understanding about alternative dispute resolution before they have a problem, so you can sort of maybe give talks about, not just dispute resolution, it's the, how much time. I think there was some research about hidden conflict can cost you up to a day, a week, because people, instead of talking about it to each other, they go and they talk to everybody else, and they stand around the water cooler and complain.
Yes, it's employment. Yeah.
There's something about, helping people understand what's going on almost before they get to the point that they need mediation, and then they're much more likely to come to you because you've helped them kind of work other things out.
Well, we also have the ADR directive, which was obviously discussed last week and would have been a subject I was going to talk about, because I think that has great potential as well, and I don't think it will get abolished through Brexit, because they're talking about this Great Repeal Nonsense Act, which is going to be keeping all the EU legislation until it is repealed. So I think it probably will remain there, and there'll be an obligation for traders to signpost to mediation or ombudsman. And again, I think businesses are more interested in mediation because it's voluntary. They don't want to be told what to do by an ombudsman. So there's a lot of potential there as well, and for improving customer service. Yeah. Because just like Pete, your employees will stand around the water cooler wasting time arguing or discussing problems in the workplace, and the customer will go online and put a horrible review about you.
That's maybe how you can get into business.
Exactly.
Is talking to them about alternative ways of handling customer complaints.
Exactly. Well, they say that a customer is more likely to use a business where they have a good complaints process.
Yeah, and that might be a way of getting more clients, because if you have a thing on, complaints handling, you'll have a lot of people turn up.
This is it.
And
this is it.
As Anthony
was, we're also doing that with the chamber.
Dispute resolution. Not many people will turn up.
Anyway, but I was just trying to really highlight these two areas, well, three if you include the ADR directive, where I think there's a lot of opportunity there for us to really push this forward. I would be interested to know what people's, how people are planning to respond to what I've said, and how we can drive this forward to implement what Briggs is suggesting before it's all forgotten. How we can lobby the MOJ or maybe through the local law societies, I don't know, or contacting the courts.
Well, if the CMC is working properly, and they know or should know how enthusiastic you are in all that you've done with smaller claims, online claims, out-of-hours services, etc., then surely they should have an internal debate there at a national level.
It would be really appreciated if you, because you're a member of the CMC. I don't know who.
Well, Mark's on the board, but
Mark is on the board.
When Mark can't go, I go.
Because I think Mark is meant to be on the on a working group or something to do with this. I don't know if you know Dominic. I think he was part of the national mediation.
Dominic Staten, yeah.
Was part of it or something. But I mean, the more people that say to the CMC that we've really got to put this at the top of the agenda, the better, really. Because I don't see that they're particularly proactive, and particularly since they don't have a chief executive at the moment.
Well, hopefully that'll change quite shortly, but certainly it's a debate that it's almost worth having this debate every 6 months. So we can say, what's the latest that they've done, and what have we done, and what should we be doing in the next 6 months?
But as individuals and as an association, I think we can't afford to just let the CMC deal with it.
No, we're a representative association, and rather than being some commercial colossus. And the problem is of all the different commercial things that I won't go into now, where you get an awful lot of competition. And at least ANM can say, well, we're above all that. We're not really bothered with the competition at all.
Yeah.
Which makes it has its uses at that level, because it means you can be respected. And I think just having a group of mediators like us being able to talk and listen to different views coming from all four corners of the North is very helpful. And I think that we can and should be able to be more proactive than we have been. And certainly you've highlighted real challenging areas where there's been pathetic failures in the past. Michael, you've suddenly come on my screen.
I'm doing that all the time.
Roy was wanting to say something.
Roy.
Anthony, as a non-lawyer, let me just test my understanding of how life is. You've talked about Ministry of Justice. The only thing we've clearly established of them is they don't want to spend any money.
That's right.
We've spoken of Briggs and his vaulting ambition to see mediation drastically reduce the load on the courts. All good aspirational stuff. But who is it that actually makes the decisions on these things? We talked about a Yorkshire service that we might tender for, but there isn't really a region called York. Who are the little holders of the fiefdom, the chiefs let's say in Leeds, that would actually make a decision, that you could go in and say, look, let's cut through all of this, let's do something. This is a service we're offering for, let's say, the Leeds area for anywhere between 10 grand and 250 grand. Is there somebody who could actually make that decision?
I think that the DCJ, Peter, wouldn't you agree that if you're all part to your elbow, they would like to be seen to be influencing at least what happens in their particular area?
Yeah, because it's about the use of the court buildings, isn't it?
Well, I think it's very retro to think about use of court buildings, because there's too many difficulties, and there's a public cost as well.
Yeah.
Whereas an awful lot of mediators, as you know, they're able to beg, borrow, scrounge, get facilities for fairly short mediation, say 2 hours. I know half a dozen mediators tomorrow who'd give you a room for a freebie in Leeds if you had that problem. So as an occasional thing, but if you're doing it every day of the week, it might be difficult.
So we need the courts to really signpost to the association, for example, or just say, look, if you...
Yeah.
The judges say
that's a brilliant idea. We love the tender. You can run it for a period of time. And just to frame my question a little bit more precisely and lay this off against my Glasgow experience, there is an exalted high being called a sheriff principal who basically leads things. Is there something equivalent?
I think Anthony's right. It's the DCJ, what's a designated civil judge. Is that what it stands for?
Yeah.
I can speak to the one in the northwest about it. Really, and just see if there's any feel for how this is going to be.
Pitching this, my sense is pitching the solution. To say, look,
I'd be happy to take the phone calls. If there was some kind of percentage, a small percent, £10 or something, if a mediation was actually arranged, because it's very straightforward, really. Or the association could use the same sort of facility.
Yeah, I mean, if I'd taken £10, or the association had taken £10 for every call we receive, we'd be getting quite a lot of money. Because 90% of those calls are people say, "Well, I got one in today. I had my necklace nicked at the local Star Club, and how can I get it back again? Or how can I get
loads of those calls?" Yeah.
And it's
be referrals from the. I think it has to be referrals from the court for existing cases, where rather than someone who's lost their necklace, it has to be the judges saying, there's this service now, the National Mediation Helpline's being reinstated. You have to go. You have to contact Anthony Glaister or something to.
Thanks.
and that's, if they're going to do that, then I think they're going to have to tender it. As a public service, they will need to do something like that.
Well, that takes us back to what we're talking, Roy, about the perhaps doing it through the local community or pro-mediate service, which I mean, it would be a big ask, Peter, for you, for pro-mediate to do all the calls in the north.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind the number of calls we receive just for the Yorkshire area, it'll be a big ask. And that's what I said is devolution is probably the answer. And it doesn't matter whether you devolve it down to a local private provider or a local regional provider like ANM. It doesn't matter. But the bigger you are, the more of a headache it is.
Could it be, though, that it's the MOJ, beefing up its website so that people can make an inquiry online or telephone someone there to find a mediator? Really, isn't it their duty to do that, to take the calls? It's
less phone calls nowadays, only between 10 and 20% of the number of inquiries you get. Most inquiries are online.
Yeah. So if they've got a form on their website where people can...
absolutely. You can... I mean, that's why if you can do most of the work online, it saves physical people.
So I come back to my point about it being the the MOJ website needs to be revamped.
Yeah, could well be. I mean, that's where 90% of our inquiries come from the MOJ website. They don't necessarily get a long way, but they're still inquiries. But they're, interestingly enough, they are inquiries that 90% is pre-litigation, so it's not people involved in litigation already then having thoughts about mediation, which is a lot we've been talking about is post-litigation mediation.
Yes.
What are they doing about pre-litigation mediation before they've even entered the portals of the court?
Well, anyway, we've come to 7 o'clock.
Yes, we have.
To go and do something, Anthony, haven't you?
Yes, you're right.
So, I mean, everything's all food for thought. And as I say, I think it's a really exciting time, potentially. There's a lot of potential there, and it's about just grasping it somehow and shaping it. A
couple of thoughts. Firstly, can we have this conversation again in 6 months' time?
Certainly.
So we can update ourselves, because it's really useful, and I can encourage, or we can encourage members to look at the recording or listen to the recording on the website, so that they can then participate. Because okay, we've been 7, 8, 9, 10 people online, but it'll be really useful to get a bigger audience and get more feedback.
Right. Okay. Definitely. If I could just request that maybe we take out the point about Jo Holland, because although that is accurate, I don't think she'd necessarily want that to be. But I don't know if you can edit what's being said. But anyway,
Nancy, are you nodding? You've got.
She's still muted. Anyway, if everyone could just,
I can edit it for you.
What I would like people to do, if possible, is to commit to doing something. Basically, if everyone would just commit to doing something about this, whether it's putting a post on their website or making a phone call, sending an email.
Very interesting to look at what Roy suggested, which is actually work out a pilot solution.
Yes, if everyone could have a think about how this system might actually work, because I admit that I'm floundering a bit as to how I can see it working. And we've had 2 ideas suggested here, either regional or centralised, for example. So if people could have a think about that, and then maybe in the 6-month period, 6 months' time, we can come back and maybe someone will have put together some sort of proposal, concrete proposal that we can put to somebody.
In 1998, right, we all met the MOJ, whatever it was called then, and we met the MOJ, and when I say we, it was the NDR from Newcastle, ANM and Midlands Mediators. We met them and we said, we will we will populate a court scheme in all your areas. Wouldn't that be great? And we had ownership for a while. As soon as you had the N word coming in, national, who is going to run the national service? I mean, it puts you back to you volunteering to do it £10 a call. You would regret making that suggestion after 6 months, I tell you. So, yeah. And then they had the National Mediation Helpline, and the national element killed it because we ceased having ownership, and certainly in Birmingham, they're absolutely apoplectic about losing their court scheme. So it takes you back to the DCJs. If we say the DCJs, and if they say, let's go back to standardized court schemes in the respective areas, then I think we'll be motoring.
Well, I mean, if you could speak to your DCJ, and I'll try and speak to mine and see, but there's no harm in having a conversation, and they may say, well, this isn't going to work, or this isn't going to happen. At least we know. Well,
Roy, when you next up, if Roy speaks to Simon Grenfell, who's the ex-DCJ in Leeds, it will be, and obviously a member, then that will be helpful.
That would be brilliant. Just the more conversations there are, the better, I think.
Well, that's why we should have it in 6 months' time. I had another point, but I can't remember what it is.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, anyway, for listening to me. Sorry, I think, you're on mute.
I'm not.
No, he is.
Mediation help week. I gave a whole week to it, and as in Liverpool, I did presentations to the court staff and to the judges, and also to the Chamber of Commerce with a what's it called, the farmers thing, the demo mediation, which I always find a great deal of fun. And so if you need any help, just come. I'm living near Chester on the Wirral.
Oh, do you? Excellent.
So give us a bell, and if you want me to come to to see the judge with you, I'll come, because I've done that in the past.
Excellent, excellent. I'm in Frodsham, so where are you?
Oh, well, I'm on Neston.
Oh, excellent.
Found a friend.
I went through Frodsham last night at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, really?
Going back from playing in Widnes. So, I mean, yeah, if I can help, I'm very keen.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you.
Good.
Okay.
Well, I'll liaise with Roy, you liaise with Mike, and the rest of you will liaise with each other. There's Sally from Cumbria, and there's Martin from Hull, who will liaise with us. That's great. All right. Excellent. Well, I'm off to listen to the Archers. I don't know about you. You can stay talking.
Thank
you very much. Bye.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.